here. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Fafsa session. This will be part of our university playbook, which will get sent out to all of the attendees and parents of attendees from the camp. And we brought together a couple people here to talk through the FAFSA process, which is basically federal financial aid. Obviously a very, very important and sometimes mind-boggling part of the process. And we thought having a conversation with a couple different people might help walk you through what that process might look like, answer some of the typical questions that people ask. So we've got Jennifer Bartholomew, who is a financial advisor at UBS and one of our great partners from the Pittsburgh area, joining us here today, along with her son, Sean, who is a junior at Bucknell. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Sean is a former student athlete, both in high school and in college until he had an injury. And then we've got our rock star Sports Biz Camp intern, Christian, here with us, who kind of asked to be a part of this panel because he went through this process over a number of years and, thought about all the questions and all the things that might have been unique to his process. So he wanted to kind of join in the conversation and walk everybody through it. So welcome, everybody. Really appreciate this. While we joked around about it may not be the most exciting topic out there, it's an extremely important one and something that I think the more people know in advance, the less anxiety they'll have about the process. So I'll turn it over to you guys, let you take it away, and I'm anxious to learn.
All right, great. Thank you, Jeff. As Jeff mentioned, I am Jennifer Bartholomew. We are now living here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Sean and I originally are from Michigan, and we lived in Southern California, Southern Colorado, and now Pittsburgh, PA, which is fantastic. Go Steelers. But we just wanted to provide a little bit of background information for everyone. So to get to know us a little better, Sean has been the product of a single family household, I would say the vast majority of his life. So we understand a lot of those challenges that are presented to you. I would say Sean did a fantastic job of becoming independent very early on, just because I was working full time. So one of the big things that was important to me, and I think to him, was academically always making sure that he was doing very well, because we wanted those opportunities for him to go to a really good school. And then Sean had always participated in sports. When we were out west in Colorado, it was inline hockey and actually long distance running. He did a little cross country camp and football. Which ironically, when we were in Colorado, he played tackle football for the Pittsburgh Steelers, was his team. So I think it was a little bit of maybe foreshadowing as to where we're going to end up moving to unexpectedly. We came to Pittsburgh in 2011. I took a job here, and Sean has a younger brother, Aiden, who is now 15. And so we moved here right after Thanksgiving. So Sean was halfway through 6th grade, and my youngest was halfway through 1st grade. Started here, and it was quite a change. We lived in Colorado Springs, which is a very military town. You have the Air Force Academy to the north, and then you have Fort Carson to the south of us. So you have Air Force and Army. So people are always coming and going in and out of schools all the time. I mean, there would be kids there one day that weren't there the next, and vice versa. So it was really interesting moving here to Pittsburgh, and we live just north of the city of Pittsburgh, because there's no one coming or going ever, and everyone knows everyone. It's a very close-knit community, which has been wonderful for us. So when Sean first arrived here, it was a big deal, especially starting halfway through the school year. So part of that was he was involved in some extracurricular activities. And when he hit 7th grade, I wanted both boys to just do something outside of school, and I wanted them interacting, whether it be a social club, like a chess club, which Sean participated in Colorado, or band or orchestra, and sports. I played sports as a kid. I loved the team camaraderie, and I loved all that. And I wanted the same for the boys. And Sean will tell you, I'd let you have winter off, but you were doing something in the fall and you were doing something in the spring. I don't care what it was, you can choose, but you're going to do something. And when Sean was in 7th grade, and I'm going to embarrass him now, sorry, but we were coming off of winter, it was going into spring. I asked Sean, what are you doing? What are you thinking? And he said, I don't want to do anything. And I said, well, that's not an option. So what are you doing? What are you thinking? And I don't know how we got to track, and it may have just been me saying, you're going to run track. And he wasn't having it. I signed him up anyway. I go to drop him off. His little brother's in the back of the car with him. I pull up to the school, and mind you, we're not even, well, you would have been there a full year by then. So still relatively newish. And I pulled up, and he's sitting in the back of the car, and he said, I'm not getting out of the car. And he can probably tell you his version. He said, I'm not getting out of the car. And I said, you have two choices. You can either get out of the car by yourself, or I will get out of the car, walk around, and drag you out of the car so everyone can see you. It's up to you. And I think there was some door slamming and some words muttered, and he got out on his own volition and went.
That might have been the motivation for him to work so hard at it and excel over all those years. Just that one moment played over and over again in his mind.
And it's a funny moment because I actually forgot about it until Sean, and he can talk about his track history at his school. He ended up lettering all 4 years in track and had quite a great career track wise, and did run track D1. But I had forgotten that entire story until when he was graduating from high school, and the school he decided to go to, he was going to be on the team. And he said, do you remember I didn't even want to run track? And I said, no, what do you mean? And he reminded me of the story about how he started out in track. So take your parents' advice. Sometimes we know something, but it's been a fantastic experience sports-wise. But I also think it's important, and Sean can touch on this a little bit more, to always think about academically what college you want to go to. And I'll let Sean give his history, but he had an injury that ended his track career earlier than he wanted to, and it was really, really difficult. But I think one of the best pieces of advice that he received was, do not go to a school because they offered you a position on a team or an opportunity to participate in athletics. Go to the school that also has your interest academically, has a good program that you want to be in academically, because situations like this happen, and through no fault of anyone, he couldn't participate in track any longer. And had he gone to a school where he wasn't very interested in their academic programs, or they didn't have a good fit for him, and there was an Ivy League school that we were looking at, but it didn't academically have the program he was interested in, and we chose a school he went to, which he'll talk about. But that mattered dramatically after track ended. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about this, and also keep in mind, if that does happen to you, Sean can speak for himself, but it opened up so many other doors, not practicing twice a day, and other opportunities that he got to meet new people. He's a resident advisor at his college now. And again, I'll let Sean talk about his story. I don't want to encumber on that, but it's not, at the time it was very, very devastating. But now in hindsight, it's just provided so many other opportunities. So I will let Sean take over here. I've done enough talking, as moms tend to do, but very proud of Sean. And I will say Sean has always been a go-getter, always been very independent, and thankfully has always completed his FAFSA application with very little involvement from me. So thank you so much, Sean. Please go ahead and give us a little bit of background on your side of things from high school to college. Thanks.
I guess I don't have much to say because it was all said for me, but
sorry about that.
A couple things to highlight. Yeah, I ran track all through high school, ever since 7th grade, since that lovely story. I had our head coach was good. He was a great mentor, and he gave me a couple of pieces of advice while I was considering running in college, which is something I really wanted to do. And like my mother said, one piece of advice that stuck with me that I want to pass on is it's about a balance of picking the school that you want to go to. So obviously, especially if there's financial involvement, that's a big opportunity that you should definitely consider taking. But just remember that you're going to be living in these places for 4 years. You want to go somewhere that you're going to like to go. And obviously finances around college are extremely limiting. And you hear a lot of those, like my mother was talking about, you hear, Ivy League, Bucknell is not notoriously known to be a cheap school, but with FAFSA, and this is the important thing that we're talking about today, with FAFSA, financial aid, knowing that system and working with it, it can really help you get to the places that you previously thought were unattainable financially. And that's why it's so important to kind of be paying attention to these kind of things. And that's kind of all that information helped me stay at Bucknell after I had a really bad hamstring injury my senior year that I thought recovered, but in the fall, it got worse when I went to run. So unfortunately, I couldn't continue. I still feel the effects of it today. So these injuries are real. And you want to be thinking about, they always say it when you're in high school. A lot of my mentors say, what's your backup plan? What are you going to do if this doesn't work out? And it's real. So part of that is, part of the reason I was able to stay at Bucknell was because I was thorough about my FAFSA and financial aid. I could afford to stay there just because of the financial aid programs that are available to students. And sometimes people don't know about them, and it's important to take advantage of them so that way you can stay where you want to stay without incurring a huge financial penalty. And that's pretty much the spiel. There's not too much to add to what my mom said there, but and what's relevant to this is how important FAFSA and that information is. And I can pass it on to Christian if you want to talk about yourself a little bit. Well, you've been on a lot of these, so they probably know you.
Yeah, they got a good understanding of who I am.
Go ahead, Sean. I think what we're going to do, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong here, I think we're going to go over a little bit of the prerequisites or the documents that you're going to need to complete your FAFSA application. There's a couple of different options as far as depending on how your parents file their taxes. So we can talk about that. And I think what Sean's going to show you today is actually the PDF version of the FAFSA form, which looks extremely intimidating, but actually may be very helpful to have in front of you or to print off and have it with your parents. So you can see the questions in advance. But nowadays, back in my day, we wrote it out on paper, but nowadays you just go to the FAFSA website and you create an account and you do everything online. But everything on that paper is online, so don't be intimidated because I think the paper is like 10 pages long. It's much cleaner online, so go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, so we'll backtrack a little bit, and Christian brought up a good point. We should talk about, in general, what is FAFSA, and let me pull the acronym up, but I believe, well, before that, FAFSA, so pretty much what FAFSA is it's a government program that assesses your family's financial position and passes that information along to government loan services and your university. And what they do with that information is determine, for your university, they will determine, they will determine how much grant money they can give you and how much federal government loan money, the government will determine how much federal loan money you can get. So it's important in those two aspects. So with your school, this is really important because this is like one of the main tools that they use to determine how much free money they give you. When you hear grant, that's free money. So they use this FAFSA to determine like, all right, how much money can we just give to this student to come to our university? And that's completely based on financial need. It's not based on, merit, your school. It's not based on your schoolwork. It's not based on your athletics. It's purely based on your family's need. And that's in my opinion, the biggest reason that this is so important is because you can get free money just by filling out this form. And then the second thing I talked about just now was with the federal side. So the government is allowed to give students federally sponsored loans that are often better than what we call privately sponsored loans, which is you get them yourself. And those have interest rates attached and different things attached. But the benefit of the government loans is oftentimes you can get loans that don't start building interest, and interest is money that collects over time from not paying loans. While you're in school, a lot of loans will collect those. The benefit of FAFSA is you can get these loans where they're not collecting interest while you're in school, which means they're not getting bigger. So loans get bigger in size in terms of money as the longer you wait to pay them off. What's nice about the FAFSA is it gives you an opportunity to get these loans of money that will not build while you're in college. And those are the two biggest reasons why this is so important, because it's pretty much getting you in multiple senses like free money, which is why it's so important. And then it also, I got the acronym, it is free application for federal student aid. So it's a free application, and all of that. So Christian, please tag on as well.
Yeah, I had a quick question. You said earlier how it's basically FAFSA is like how much money you get in terms of free money.
Yeah.
So does that differ between like each school that you apply for? Like, do you get different sums or allowances between different schools?
Yeah, so this is heavily dependent on which school you go to. What happens at the end of the FAFSA, you'll get your results on like a PDF. I think it takes a couple of days, and they'll give you your kind of results, like your evaluation. And the biggest number that you're going to want to look for on that is going to be at the very top. It's acronymed the EFC, which is the estimated family contribution. And it's a number that ranges from 0 to 5 nines. So 0 to 99,999. And that's not necessarily a dollar amount. That's just a ranking in terms of 0, meaning your family cannot contribute anything, or like you're in a very difficult financial spot, which will then prompt your school to be the most aggressive with your plan and give you the most money. And then with 99,999 being like, you can afford, we're pretty much not going to do anything for you. Like, you can afford everything. So you'll probably fall in some range in the middle. You'll get a 5-digit number. It's a scale. And again, that number is just passed along to your university, and then they use this information to formulate a plan for you. But it is very dependent on the university, and you'll have to wait. Unfortunately, when you submit the FAFSA, it'll go to your school, and then you'll have to wait from your school's financial aid office to make a decision about how much money you get. So it is very dependent on where you go, and that sort of thing. But all right, with that said, we want to talk about some of the things that you need prior to starting the FAFSA, that you'll need on the FAFSA, or that you'll need to have completed before you do it. There's one main thing that you need to complete before you do it, and this is more tailored for the male audience. There's something in the United States called the Selective Service System. It's pretty much signing up for, if you're a man, if the U.S. goes to war, you have to sign up for this, and you're going to be drafted. It's a requirement for all men over the age of 18 in the United States. And if you do not sign up for this program, you cannot receive financial aid. So it's extremely important. I'll go ahead and share my screen. It's a really easy process. All you do is go to sss.gov. All I did was, prior to this, Googled the Selective Service. And you can see register now is a button. It's like a few step process. And you can also, if you don't know if you're registered yet, you can easily verify now, and it just asks, so it just asks for these 3 pieces of information, and it'll spit out you're registered, you're not, and it's super easy. So if you don't know, this would be your first step. And if you know you're not, then it's easy to register. You just want to take care of this before you start the FAFSA, because it is required. It's even a question, as you'll see on our PDF version of the FAFSA. So definitely something you want to take care of prior. Super easy. Probably not even a big deal. You probably won't even remember. Half the time I make sure to verify. I know now because I've verified it so many times, but you might not even remember doing it because it's such a simple thing, but it's important to do before the FAFSA. And then here is the PDF of the FAFSA that we were talking about that looks extremely intimidating. I know there's like a lot of boxes, a lot of information to fill out. And like was stated before, when you're doing this on the FAFSA website, you're only going to get a box of one piece of information at a time. So it'll be easy to read it and then submit the information that's needed. Obviously, it's a little bit nuanced, and sometimes, I mean, I always have questions for my mom whenever we're doing this FAFSA. So it's really a good idea to be doing this with your parents, if you can, or parent, or, you know, in my case, I always sat down with my mom and did this just because it asks a lot about your family situation, and your family finances, not just about you. So you need information from multiple people in your household.
I would jump in too, sorry, Sean, real quick.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I'm sure you could probably do the application on your phone. It may be a bit challenging. So if you don't have computer access at home, you can check with your high school guidance counselors, or you can go to the local library with one of your parents and complete it there as well. But I think and Sean, you tell me, but I think it would be really challenging to try to complete this on your phone.
Yeah, I would definitely try to find access to a computer, like she said, the local library or your high school. It would be very difficult to do this on your phone, B, on your own. I really stress that it was super easy to get through this if you just find a time with your parent or parents to work through this together. And speaking of your parents, one thing that you'll need from them is whether they file their taxes online. You can ask these questions to them. If they file their taxes online, then they're going to want to know their sign in for the IRS website, because the FAFSA allows you, when you do it online, it allows your parents to pull all of their tax information, which is basically all the information about their income from the previous year. So for example, if you're filling it out in 2020, then it'll ask for all your parents and your tax information, which is about your income from 2019. So it'll ask about the previous year. And that information is super easy if your parents do taxes online. If they don't, then you're going to want to ask them to have their copy of their previous year's W-2, which is pretty much their income tax form. They'll probably know what you're talking about if you ask those questions to your parents. But again, reiterating how important it is to be doing this alongside your family, because I know how difficult it can be to ask your family to help you out with different things and stuff, but it really, for them, it's helpful for all of you. And if explain to them that this is saving you money, essentially, and they will do what they can to help you, I'm sure.
And Sean was beyond persistent with me. I mean, and I would say the same thing, just be very persistent and demand the answers. I think I was traveling for work and he would call me and I would sit down in the hotel and pull up my information, because it is very important to get it in. The sooner the better. There's a window that opens up when you complete your FAFSA each year. And keep in mind, you have to complete your FAFSA every single year. It's not just your first year. You have to do it every single year because things change income wise. But yeah, Sean would reach out to me and just basically, I need this now. And he would force me to sit down and answer the questions, which that's his job. So I'm glad he did.
Yeah, that's another important thing I did want to talk about. Like she said, every single year you have to do this. The window opens usually at the middle to end of October. And then it closes. The closing part is dependent on your school. Every school sets their own deadlines for that. But it does always open in October. So, come October, even if you want to set it like November 1st, it'll always be open by November 1st. You just set a date, November 1st. That's when we're going to get on FAFSA, because it opens. And the window for my school, I think March is pretty traditional. I know every year I have to have all this information submitted by March. And so that's a pretty wide window. Definitely want to try and get it in sooner rather than later. Obviously you don't have to, right when the window opens, you don't have to do it. Just, whenever a convenient time for you and your parents is, try to get it done in that time frame, or definitely get it done in that time frame. Try to get it done as early as possible. Is there any other pieces of information that people want to tag on to that?
So Sean, when they're a senior in so you're talking like November, December, January, when they're seniors in high school for their freshman year of college, right?
Right. So if you're a senior in high school, it'll open that October of your senior year, which means it'll be open the year prior to like the next year of schooling. So if you're a senior in high school, then it'll be open the October, November of your senior year of high school for your freshman year. And that'll be the same recurring thing for every year. So your freshman year of college, it'll open fall of your freshman year. And that application will actually be for your sophomore year. So it's very much in advance, but something you want to keep track of. So upcoming seniors, this is something to pay attention for. It'll be open very soon. October, it's crazy how this year is, but it is coming. You still want to do this. And yeah, it'll be the year prior to.
And does it matter? What if you don't know what college you're going to yet? Should you still do it ahead of time?
Yeah, you absolutely can do this ahead of time. There's an option on the FAFSA that does ask for, I want to say it asks for your potential schools, but if you don't know, that is totally okay, because you can go back in. If you don't know all of your potential schools at that time, you can go back in and add that school in, and all that is sending the universities your information so they can build a financial aid package for you. So you can always go back in and add a school after you complete it. That's no big deal at all. And if you know your potential schools, you can list them all out, because they want to send all of your information to every school you're thinking of going to, so that they can build a financial aid plan for you when you apply. Obviously, after your senior year of high school, once you know where you're going, that won't be an issue. You just have to put one school. But yeah, it always definitely apply early, and you can always add a school later. No issue there.
Okay, good.
Any other, Christian, anybody?
Yeah, I wanted to add also, be sure to write down your password and save key, because these passwords are really case sensitive, and if you mess it up, you'll have to call, and it's a whole process to get it back. So be sure to write it down.
Yes,
that's a really good point.
That's a really good point. And I think the FAFSA also has like, if you need to like break up the process of filling out your FAFSA, they have a second password where it's like a key code or a shortcut password that's like shorter, which isn't like your normal password. Pretty much what that allows you to do is stop the process while you're in the middle of it. So like Christian said, there can be a lot of different things going on. So make sure you write down all your passwords and stuff that relate to this process. Cool. Anything else before we kind of dive into the actual document?
Can you make it a little bigger, or is
that, I don't know, does it look small?
Oh yeah, that's great.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, much better. Thanks.
All right. So the first few questions, and like I said, I don't remember exactly how this is going to look when you do it online. If you can do it online, it'll be pretty much one to like a few questions at a time, very approachable. It won't look like this looks like crazy, but I mean, with anything like this, you just, a big assignment like this, or a big anything, you just want to break it down piece by piece, answer the questions one at a time. There's no rush. If you ever run into a question, your first line of defense is always your parents. A lot of times they will have some sort of tidbit of information to help you. And if they don't know, there's plenty of resources on the FAFSA website, numbers to call, that sort of thing. Take your time, start just breaking it down question by question. There'll be questions where you're like, that's easy, like your last name, that should be really easy to fill in. But there'll be other things that are like, oh man, like your social security number, that can be, some people don't know that off the top of their head. I know I didn't remember it at first. By the time, I'm sure many of you know, as you're applying for colleges, or you'll find out, you'll have your social security number memorized after this, because you got to put it in so many different places. But at first you might not have those things memorized. So you have to reach out to your parents, be like, hey, do you have my social security card in the back somewhere, or wherever, hidden somewhere? So that sort of thing.
And Sean, do you have to complete this all at once, or can you save it and kind of do it over the course of a week or so?
Yeah, no, so that's what Christian and I were just talking about. You can, you can stop mid filling it out. It'll ask you to create a short little key code password. I think it's like 4 to 6 digits or something like that. and you can stop and resume at any time. So if you get stuck and you're over, or if you're just overwhelmed because it's so much information, you can just stop and create that little key code, write it down, and you can just start it up whenever you feel comfortable again, in a somewhat timely manner. But you can always, you have a lot of time to do this. I know I'm preaching the do it as early as possible part, but I do want to emphasize, like, don't get stressed out about the early part. I mean, I know my first year, I think I did it December or January, I want to say. So we waited a couple months. It didn't affect it. It really had little effect on it. So obviously, if you can, do it as early as possible, but don't let it work yourself up about completing it as fast as possible, because it's not like a super speedy process that is dependent on minutes, like, or weeks even. Like, take your time with it. And if you do need to stop, like my mother just emphasized, just take your time, stop, create the key code, and get the answers to your questions. It's not something that you need to just hammer out at once. So yeah, this is the first part. It's just getting general information, pretty easy. It'll ask a lot of these questions about U.S. citizenship and those kind of statuses, and it'll kind of send you to different places. Again, when you're doing this online, it won't be in this kind of format where you're seeing all of it at once. It'll kind of pass you along where you need to go depending on your answers. So a lot of this, you won't actively have to think about when you're doing it. You're just going to fill out the information as you know to be correct, or your parents know to be correct. And that's another important thing while we're talking about it. Always answer the most correct way you can. I know I get super tripped up with a lot of these questions because they can get technical. They're like, all right, well, what are you talking about? Before you answer, if you're unsure about a question, ask those resources that we talked about, your parents, family, online resources. Consult other resources if there's a question you're unsure about, because it's important to get this information correct so that they can build the best package for you, and you get your results faster too. If there's any questions that they have about your application, they'll have to reach out and contact you to clarify them. And that can be a really stressful position for you, because then it's like, oh my gosh, I messed something up. It's not a big deal, but it is stressful because, now the money that you're supposed to get from your school that is going to allow you to go, you have to wait to find out what that's going to be. And it's just a more timely kind of process. So the big thing with that is just try to answer everything you know to be correct. There might be some mistakes that fall through. It's not a big deal, but just try your best and they will get cleared out on the back end. But the most accurate information you can give, that will be the best chance you have at getting through this successfully. And usually people don't have too much of an issue with that. It depends, obviously, circumstance by circumstance, but that's the biggest thing. Moving down, it starts to ask questions about, your family, what kind of schooling they've completed, and all this is just general information building your kind of background, and how much financial need that they estimate you have. It's a very robotic process, but this will help you again in the long run. I'm trying to think, is there anything as we highlight through from Christian or do you guys have anything that I'm missing or?
I just, there are parent questions. Like if you bump back up to like 25, Sean,
Yeah.
I was actually a little surprised over this one as far as wanting to know my educational background. And keep in mind too, they do have an other or unknown. So if you are in a situation where one of your parents is not available to ask and you're unsure, you can put unknown. That's fine. It's not going to impact anything. Like Sean mentioned, just try to answer everything as clearly and truthfully as you can. And if you don't know, you don't know.
And that's exactly true. And especially questions like these, the questions, I mean, let's be real, it's all about the money here. The questions that relate to like high school completed by parent two, they ask it because it is building a profile about your family. But when you say other or unknown and you have good reason for it, usually you won't get questions about these like minor statements like here. They really care about, all right, what does your family make? That kind of thing, not to put it bluntly, but that is pretty much the whole purpose of this. So don't like stress over, answering questions, especially if there is an other unknown option and you do not know and your parents do not know. Totally okay to put that option. I know I filled out this option every year since I've done it. So it's no shame, no worry if you don't know a question, an answer, and there's an option for that. Now, if there's no option for other or unknown, then you should probably find that answer. But Um, other than that, go ahead and utilize. You have all those options for a reason. So these are pretty, like I said, all these questions so far are straightforward. If I think people have gotten a chance to kind of go through all this, but again, all straightforward information for the most part. You should know if you're married. You should know your state that you live in, you know, your sex and all that stuff. So you should know all this information. Super straightforward going down. It starts to get a little bit complicated, especially when it goes to step 2 student. This is stuff that's all going to pertain to you and your financial information. So just making sure I'm highlighting that these are pretty easy. Yep, these are pretty straightforward.
Oh, Sean, can you talk about the work study a little bit?
Oh,
not something we did, but we can talk about that in general. The work.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with the program. I do know it's a federally sponsored program that allows you to get more financial aid by pairing with your university, and you'll be guaranteed a job on campus. And it can help you kind of get more financial aid and work with your school. You'll have pretty much a required amount of hours each week, I believe, of work that you have to do. But to that extent, I don't know a ton about it. I just know that it's a partnered work sponsored program with your university that guarantees you a job essentially once you get on campus and hours. I don't know if anyone else knows a little bit more about that program, but I'm familiar with it to that extent. But if it's something that you know about and are interested in, it's great for student athletes that really want to work on campus and have that opportunity and guaranteed to them. This is something you should definitely look into. Does that kind of cover?
Yeah, and there's more detail. Again, this is where the paper application is not the best option, but we couldn't dummy up a FAFSA government application for you. You have to answer, because the questions come at you incrementally. You have to keep going, so there's no way to kind of get in there. And I do know for the work study, when you get to that question, I believe there's a little question mark where you can click on that, and it'll give you more detail as to what it is, and especially depending on what school you're going to, they'll have to coordinate and see what programs are available at that particular university.
Yeah, and if you have general questions like that, I mean, I'm a big advocate for using Google. Like, you know, I just pop open a new tab here. What is the work study program for university students? And that sort of thing. And I could even I don't want to deviate from the FAFSA because we're doing the FAFSA right now, but that's a super easy question to get answered. And it is a program that's utilized everywhere that receives federal funding. Which is most universities in the country. So it's definitely worth noting. If you're interested in having a job on campus, it could be something interesting to you. It might provide more opportunity for you if that's something you're interested in. So feel free, always use Google. If you're able to fill out the FAFSA online, then you have access to Google. Get those questions, you have those general questions answered. Sometimes, obviously, if you're looking for more intricate details, Google may not be your best friend, but general questions like that, always pop open a new tab and get that figured out. So now here's where we get into a little bit more of the financial information, and this is about you, the student. Now, luckily, this is a little bit less stressful for students, at least it was for me, because when I worked in school, I didn't make all that much money. So when I worked in high school, so it was pretty relatively easy. And as you can see, it's asking for 2018. So this would have been the 2019 FAFSA application. So this opened up last October, is the form we're looking at right now. Obviously right now would be very, very late if you're filling it out for 2019. So don't follow that example, but this is just the example we have chalked up for here. So as you can see, it's a very common question. It asks first about your tax returns for 2018. So all of this is going to be referencing all of the work you did in 2018, which I know can be kind of a lot, especially if you're doing this early. You may not have filed your tax returns for 2018 yet, or for the year that you're doing. And a lot of these questions for tax returns luckily ask, I will file but haven't yet. Perfectly okay answer, because it'll ask for W-2s, which are sent to you by the places you work. So no worries on that. But just make sure, like you said, you're answering these questions the best of your ability. And this is where parent questions came in super helpful for me. Whether it was my mom or an online resource, like these questions start to get, this is where it starts to get a little bit more confusing because it gets into the depth of the finances. So if we're starting at 32, let's say you want to have one or two selected. There are some circumstances where you can have 3 selected, and that's if you didn't make a certain amount of money. Totally okay if you know you're in that boat, but usually your options are going to be limited to option 1 or option 2 here. And then moving on to 33. Yeah, so a lot of the time, I want to say a lot of the time it's going to be an IRS 1040. Again, I'm asking my mom as normal.
Yeah, that's a good question. And with the tax law changes in, I think it was late 2018, so there used to be an IRS 1040, and there used to be an IRS 1040, the NREZ. So most students like Sean, you just had a part-time job in high school, you would have done the 1040 EZ. It's a very simplified version of a tax return, and it's really all you need. You don't own a home or things like that. So you can do the NZ. It was a 1-pager. I think now with all the tax changes, everyone has a 1040. And then you just go from there. So I don't even think this is applicable anymore with the tax law changes that we see now. And now it's just everyone does a 1040. And then you kind of go from there as far as how much detail you need to put into your returns. But I typically, Sean and I sit down and do his tax returns every year. There's lots of online places you can do it. And again, it's very intuitive, like the FAFSA. It'll ask you the questions and direct you where you need to go. So it's another piece. I highly encourage you to take a look and see what it's like to do your own taxes, because it is not as painful as you think it is while you're young. Then when you're older, get an accountant. So
while we're on the taxes questions, if people have questions about their specific tax circumstances or their parents, where's a good spot that they can go to get that information off the top of your head?
Yeah, they can there's a lot of websites. Quite honestly, H&R Block would probably have some great online resources. And then TurboTax is a popular online tax service. Taxact.com is another one. And you can go through, they'll have FAQs in there. So if you do have questions, there's a lot of resources again online that you can look for as well.
And it just popped in my head too, when you're doing anything financial relating to yourself, it's probably good to save the you always get a final document after you're done. Even same for the FAFSA, actually, you'll get a final copy after you're done filling it out. It's always a good idea to save those documents because, for example, we're using tax documents that you may have filled out, a year or 2 ago, depending on the circumstance. So it's always good to save those because you never know in the future when you might need them. And that's also a good place to go. That just popped in my mind. Just pull up your old financial documents and see. Like for this question too, it'll be labeled right at the top that this is a form IRS 1040 or whatever. All the codes, it'll usually appear right at the top of the form. Soon we'll get into questions about the W-2. I think it's on here somewhere. But the W-2 is a pretty standard, normal tax document that a lot of people receive for their work. And it'll say right at the top is an W-2 work form and has all of these categories. So save your documents and pull them out right now. That's exactly what they're here for. And yeah, so. Yeah,
the W-2 is when you are employed by an employer and they pay you every year by January 31st, they have to send to you in the mail to your address of record what's called a W-2, and it just itemizes all the gross income you earn, taxes withheld, and things like that. So that will be mailed to your home. It's a law. They have to mail it to your home it has to be postmarked by January 31st.
And a lot of you who are working now may be familiar with Workday or other programs. A lot of the websites and things, especially Workday, that companies work through nowadays, you can often find, once your W-2 is available, you can often find it on those websites and those kind of things. So I know in high school I worked at Chipotle. They used Workday. And what you could do with that is go onto Workday's website, sign in through Chipotle or whatever organization. If you know what I'm talking about, then you'll know the process to get into your company's like time tracking, hours tracking kind of website. And my W-2 is always available electronically on there as well, which is really easy because if you're using your computer, it's going to be on there already. You know how to find it. Just another way to get those forms. So moving on from these initial IRS questions, a lot of these kind of tie into it. You have questions about adjusted gross income, which we'll talk about right now. They tell you, even when you do this online or when you do it here, they tell you exactly where to find it on your tax returns or that kind of thing. What you can also do is use, if you haven't filed your tax returns, the W-2, which we were just talking about, you will have access to your W-2 before your tax returns are completed. So if you know you haven't done the tax return yet, you can look to your W-2 for this information. So adjusted gross income is a common one that we hear. And that's just your, what they say, gross income, which means all of the money that you made before taxes. That'll always be reported on any of the W-2 or your tax return financial documents. And it'll use that terminology. So when you're looking at these papers, these forms, all these tax forms and stuff, look for adjusted gross income, AGI, sometimes it'll be abbreviated to. It'll always be on there, and that's kind of the common term for what they're going to ask for how much money you made. That's usually the term they use. They rarely ask for, the net money after taxes and stuff. The main thing you want to be concerned about is what this is, which is all the money you made before you got taxed on it, and where to find it. They tell you right here, IRS Form 1040, and if you haven't done your tax returns, you can find it on the W-2. Super simple. So again, it is a slow process. Obviously, you just have to find this information and figure out the answers to these questions. And at any time, you can stop if you need to go find a document, or you're like, oh, today I don't know if I can find my W-2 today. I don't know where it is. I've talked to my mom. No sweat. Just save, enter your key code later, and come back to it. But that's the biggest thing, is taking your time and finding this information. Yeah. So going through, so these are just, again, questions regarding income tax. And actually, to highlight this portion too, if your parents, this comes back to whether you file your tax returns online or not. If your parents do, especially when we move out, this is for the student. I always had to do this by hand because I don't remember exactly why, but we can never pull my information from the IRS website. But after you kind of work through all these financial questions one by one, again, a lot of these questions probably won't apply to many of you, which is pretty easy, but just keep working through it. Read every question for what it is. But when you get to the parent section of the financial forms, oftentimes it'll allow you to pull all that information directly from the IRS website, which is super helpful because it's literally like a click of a button. You have your parent sign into their IRS account, pulls all their information into the FAFSA. It skips a whole slew of questions that you had answered for yourself. It skips all those questions for your parents because it can pull all that information from the IRS, which is super helpful. Not to skip over the boring stuff here, but a lot of it is just you have to read it individually, and we are a little bit limited on time, so I'm not going to read through every single question individually, but the important thing is to just go through, look at these questions, and answer them to the best of your ability. And if you don't know and you can't get the answer immediately, it's always okay to stop and figure it out from there. Looking further on, again, more student-tailored questions that are pretty straightforward to answer. Yes, no questions. I don't think there's any need to be concerned there. And here we get to your parents' information. And this is why it's so important to have your parents with you when you're filling this out. Or parents, singular, plural, I understand. So that's why it's so important, because this is all of their information, and this is a lot of stuff that they're going to need to know. And it's hard to call your parents when they're at work or whatever, trying to figure it out. I made this mistake the first time I did it because my mom was gone. I was like, oh, let me just fill this out. And it took me longer to fill it out, and it was definitely more stressful than if I had just said, all right, Mom, let's sit down and do this together. So it can be done without doing that. And if you can't find a common time with your parents, it can be done. but it's obviously way easier if you're sitting with them, because then they can just hop over on the keyboard and start putting in all their information. And it's pretty much going to be almost identical questions to the ones you were asked, but just on a bigger scale, because your parents have, normal income, and a lot of it's going to be pulled from IRS and that kind of thing. So the big thing is sit down with your parents, do it with them. They will most likely be familiar with a lot of what's going on. And if they're not, there's plenty of resources to find. But as you can see, very recognizable because we just saw it up above for the student, but it's very similar questions. How much money did this parent make when? They're asking about up here, the same, filing tax returns and that kind of thing. And it always referenced my parents, so you know who they're talking about. Totally okay to have your parents work with you and have them kind of go through this with you too. I mean, highly encouraged. So, and then a lot of these, I think it was prefaced in the student section, but if you have a question that doesn't apply, as is parent two, I think it said above, I don't know if it says it here, always fill out these little box ones with a 0. If it doesn't apply, or you don't know, or it is 0, whatever the case is, 0 is like the universal term for don't know, doesn't exist, that sort of thing, not relevant. That's the option you want to go to for there. I know that off the top of my head. I just read it up here. I hate scrolling back, but I did just read it. I don't know. It's not important, but yeah. Anyways, that's the answer you want to go to for those kind of questions. So that's the only thing I could foresee you kind of running into issues here is with the parent two situation. I know I did. So
yeah, and I think the nice thing about it being online too is I think every question has like a little question mark or something that you can highlight over, and it'll provide you with a little bit more detail. So if you're not sure, for us, for parent two, that's information we don't have. So again, we were trying to make sure we're answering everything truthfully and as honestly. And so I think there was a little highlight that we went over and read the details. And again, as Sean said, if you don't know the information, we just put zeros in.
Yeah, and that's if you find a common trend here, the paper version is much more difficult to complete. So if you do have any opportunity to do this on a computer, whether it be at your high school, your library, or at home, it's so much easier and so much more approachable to do it that way. Obviously, this form is it's feasible to do this on paper, but it's just so much easier to find access to a computer to do this. So to highlight that, obviously, we're even working with it here, but like she said, there's always like a little question mark or highlight box that you can select to get more information about the questions being asked. But in terms of parents, it's very similar questions to what you were asked in the previous section. And a lot of the times the IRS website can pull all this information in when you're doing it online, which saves you a ton of time in answering all these questions again, but for your parents. And so we'll move on from that section. I don't know if you answered yes to any questions in step 3. So again, the online version is super helpful because if you answer, like you see step 5 student here, it says complete this step only if you answered yes to any questions in step 3. Well, if you did it online and you answered no to all those questions in step 3, you wouldn't even ever see this. So it's stuff like that makes online easier. But again, just follow directions, do answer the questions truthfully, and it'll take you to the places you need to go. If you need, you can scroll back up to step 3, which was up here. And if you answered yes to any of those, then you're like, okay, I need to fill out this step 5. But pretty easy and straightforward. Still, if you're doing it on paper, just easier if you're doing it online. And here's Christian's question coming into relevance of which college that you are planning on attending. So this is an important statement right here. Indicate which colleges you want to receive your FAFSA information. Now, again, if you're doing this online, you have more than 4 slots. You can add way more slots. You can add as many as you need. This paper one only has 4. But to reiterate, if you don't know the schools that you're applying to yet, you don't fully know, put the ones you do know, and you can always, again, when you're doing this online, instead of on this paper version, you can always go back and add more in. But this is important because this is how your school will receive the information that you put on this FAFSA, and that's how they're gonna use that information. Remember that EFC, that estimated family contribution number, to determine how much free money to give you and how much federal government money they can loan you, and that'll help you, because the more of that you can get, then the less you have to take out in private loans. And private loans, as we talked about before, a lot of the times grow as you're in college. They become bigger because of interest, and interest is just tacked onto it. And that will compound as you're in school and become a bigger loan. So the biggest thing here is you want to get these federal school codes. A lot of schools you can just Google, like Bucknell University for my school, federal aid school code or something. Or if you've received emails from these schools, a lot of times that information will be there. And this is really important just so that these colleges get that information. And then the nice thing is, when you do this, if you do this early enough, a lot of the times your school will have a date for this, but your school can give you your financial aid package when you get your application decision back. So that makes the decision way easier, because as we know, I think May 1st is always the deadline for when you choose schools. So if you have this information given to them before you apply, they can, along with your application decision, like, yeah, you've been accepted, this is your financial aid package. So that way you have all of that information and you're armed to make an educated decision about where you want to go to school. And that's why this is important, because they can give this information to you when they decide if you've been accepted or not, which makes it it makes it a lot easier to make those decisions when you can have the finances worked out as well, of how much it's going to cost and that kind of thing. So obviously, very important step. You want schools to receive this information.
Sean, can I add a quick point to that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I think it's important for people to realize, like, sometimes when you don't go to like a main campus, you have to put in the address and the location of the main campus, because for instance, at Johnson & Wales, we have a campus here in Charlotte. It won't pop up and populate your school code, so you won't be able to apply your financial aid to your direct school. So you would have to apply the main campus location and their credentials to get their school on the FAFSA.
That's a really good point. And that will cause delays and issues. So that's a super good point, Christian. So you're using the main campus address. I would also say too, Christian brought up another point, because eventually you'll decide how much money you're going to take. And keep in mind, and Sean and Christian both ran into this, when you're living on campus, you're typically having a meal plan and things like that. So initially, your freshman year, I know for Sean, it was the largest loan we took because of the meal plan. And as things progressed, you start living off campus, or you get an apartment on campus where you can do more of your meals yourself. That's going to dramatically impact how much money you need every year. And so as Christian mentioned, we were talking offline, you have to pay that money back. Now, what Sean's talking about is federal student aid versus private loan student aid. So federal student aid defers interest. So let's say you borrowed $25,000 from the federal government to go to school. Their federal government is not going to charge you for borrowing that money on day one. When you graduate from school and 6 months after, then they will start charging you interest, and then you have to start making your payments. Versus a private loan, like if you went to a bank and obtained the rest of the money you needed, let's say the federal aid wasn't enough and you had to go to a private bank or Sallie Mae or something like that to get a loan, they start charging you interest the day you take the money. And if you you can choose to defer that interest, and I'll tell you what that means. You can choose to pay the interest every month. But if you choose to defer the interest, what that means is, let's say you took out that $25,000 and they charge you, let's say $100 a month in interest. If you do not pay that $100, it adds on to that. So now you owe $25,100, and the interest for the next month is based upon that $25,100. So you can see it starts creating this enormous snowball that potentially by the end of the 4 or 5 years when you're done with school, that could really inflate the initial loan that you took. So keep that in mind. Nothing is free. You have to pay back everything eventually, but you really want to focus, and that's why it's so important for the application to be done and to do that, because that money is not going to charge you interest while you're in school.
You have to pay back everything but grants. I just want to emphasize that.
That is true.
There are
loans. Yep, you're right.
That's why,
Go ahead.
like, sorry. Are you, is that?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay. Okay. The Zoom struggles. But that's why this is so important, because you can even, like she was talking about, you can get those government loans that don't do the snowballing, and you can get grants. And when you see the word grant, free money, you think free money, that's great. And Christian, thank you for adding that point about the satellite campuses and stuff, because I did not know that. That's good stuff. But yeah, so, and then, did we want to talk about, Mom, you might be best to talk about this too, the Parent Plus loan situation, and the difference between that and a normal loan?
No, that's a good point. So there's also another option for federal student loan aid that us parents can do, and you can apply for what's called a Parent Plus loan. Now, the FAFSA should be completed every year by your student and help them complete that. But once again, if this is a situation, maybe you don't want them to have the loan in their name, or you want to have the loan, however you want to situate that, there is an option for parents to complete. It's called a Direct Plus loan application for parents. And what you do as a parent is very similar to this, where you would create a login. And again, if you can do it online, either at home or a library, or perhaps the high school counselor, you can use a library at your child's high school. You would go in, and it looks very similar to this, but it's going to focus solely on you. Now there's pros and cons to each. The FAFSA loan, that loan is in your child's name. So when Sean graduates from college, he is 100% responsible for that loan. Whereas if you do the Direct Plus parent loan, that loan is in your name, the parent, and you are 100% responsible for that loan. So that's a little bit of the distinction there. I definitely look into both options to see what is the best fit for your family. That's a good point. Thanks, Sean. Yep.
And just to reiterate to it, the distinction between how much money you need your first year versus years after. Obviously, she was talking about how meal plans can change, and you can need less money for that. Housing also changes. So I think, and Christian can talk more about this, but I think in his case, he moved off campus. So that pretty much eliminated his entire university housing budget that he would need. I mean, in some places, at least in my case, I know housing at our school costs like, I think $9,500, $10,000. And when I started RA position, or if you move off campus, that's $10,000 of loans that you don't need to take anymore. And I'll pass it along to allow more conversation about this, but it's good to make sure you know the total cost that you're going to need to yourself before you start applying for loans and that kind of thing. I think you can fill out the FAFSA pretty early, because since they kind of, in this step right here, they communicate with the school about what you're paying for. But especially when you start applying for loans, you want to make sure you know what school is going to cost for you. I know every school, if you look up the terms, your school and then comprehensive fee, they will have everything broken down by category. And that way, you know exactly what you're paying for and why. And it can get more intricate. I know a lot of times they don't always have all of the meal plan options and all the housing options. Obviously, don't fret. You can always get more detailed. Once you're there, you'll know more information about the different meal plans. But a lot of times your first year, what they'll do in that comprehensive fee section is price out what the majority of freshman year would look like. They price it out for first year. So that way you can just find that information easily when you first get there. And then once you're there for your sophomore, junior, senior year, you'll know the breakdowns from the meal plans from information you get there. So always look up, comprehensive fee. And then if we want talk more about, I don't know, does that kind of cover what
Mhm.
we're thinking.
That's great.
All right, perfect. I think we are near the end of this form here. Okay, yeah, this usually doesn't apply if for some reason this doesn't apply if your parent is working with you to complete this. This prepare thing is if you are actually unable to complete it yourself and someone like was legally obligated to complete this form for you. It's a really rare circumstance. Don't fill this out if your parents helped you in the process. Like if you were sitting at the computer working with your parents, doesn't count. It's not the same thing. That's allowed. This is for people who the preparer thing is for people who are physically unable to do this on their own. So don't worry about that. Very basic questions, and I think that ties up. As you can see here, look, I think these are FAQs. If that's, oh no, these are just notes. These are notes on questions. So more information about a lot of this information too, if you're doing it online, will be in those little question mark boxes that we talked about. Again, highlighting the trend. It's really good to do this online on the actual Fafsa website. But a lot of these questions, these are what's going to be in those little question mark boxes. So these are all kind of additional information about questions that need a little bit more explaining. But that's the extent of it. It seems intimidating, especially when you look at it in this format, but it goes pretty quickly. Once you collect all the information, it's really not a big deal, and it's super, super helpful. I mean, from personal experience, I mean, my college costs have been cut in half because of, just filling this out. So it's really, really important thing to fill out. I would not be able to go to the school I go to without these resources. And I know many of you probably have the same thoughts flowing through your mind. Like, I don't know if I can go to the places I want because they're super expensive. It might not answer all of your questions, or it might not completely solve your financial problems, but it definitely helps a ton in different situations. So that's all. That's what I got. Yeah, that's the FAFSA.
That's the FAFSA. So as Sean said, the best course of action with FAFSA, don't be intimidated by it. Definitely fill it out and have all your documentation with you ahead of time, because it'll make it so much easier rather than having to keep going back and back and forth and trying to dig up things. It'll save you a lot of time just to have everything there and ready to go.
And to add on that point real quick, do your research. Understand what the loans mean. Understand what the FAFSA application is asking for, because it's going to save you a lot of heartache on the back end having to pay back those loans if you never really understood what they meant to begin with. So can't emphasize enough, do your research on what the loans and application means.
Very
Absolutely.
true. Very true.
One thing to add on that, one thing I always do every year before I apply for the loans that I need is I just go through and I do it by hand on the computer or whatever, is figure out like to the dollar how much money I exactly need. So that way you're not running into problems where you have extra, or you also don't want to run into the problem of not having enough, because, we know how universities get. If you're short, they will definitely hound you. And sometimes they can even, restrict you from going to class and stuff if you don't have the required funds. So it's really a great idea just to search through your university's website, figure out exactly how much money you need to give them. And that way you're not stuck with a whole extra amount of money that's really not yours that you kind of have to pay back. But you're also not short. It's important to get those numbers correct. And it's not hard. Your university has to, disclose all of the costs and fees to you. So it's very searchable information. Just make sure that you have it squared away, because, it definitely can hurt in the end. I know there's been clerical errors that I've made that I've had to kind of roll back and figure out. I know Christian was telling us a story too about that kind of situation. So just important, like he said, to get that stuff figured out.
And I think it gets easier, especially after your freshman, when you're applying as a senior. But keep in mind too, if you do know where you're going to school and you're really committed, you can call the financial aid office. You can call, you can email, and they will be extremely helpful to you because they want your money to go to school. But they are extremely helpful. They can answer a lot of questions. I'm sure Sean has some kind of special VIP that when he goes to the Bucknell financial aid office, because we go in there and we ask a ton of questions, and keep that in mind through your entire college career. Your counselors, your instructors, financial aid, everyone is there working for you and for your education. Don't make assumptions. Don't be scared to ask questions. Really, really utilize their time. That's what they're there for. I will say Sean did a much better job than I ever did when I was in college. I didn't ask anybody anything. I was a first generation college attendee. I didn't know a whole lot at all. And I had no one to ask, and I felt like I had no one to ask, and really utilize those resources. And I will say Sean is constantly in communication with his counselors, in communication with the financial aid office. That's what they're there to do. They're there to help you. So use all those resources you have available.
Yeah. And that's not even just with FAFSA, that's with anything ever. Like literally any question you have that's related to academics, find someone that can answer your question, because they exist. I promise you they exist in some form. And if you don't know exactly who has those answers, just call who you think is the most related to it. And then they'll be like, oh, that's actually this person. And then they'll just transfer you over. Like, it's super easy. Always, just call someone and ask, and they'll 99% of the time you'll find someone with an answer in anything. Even if it's about school when you get there, if you're struggling with stuff when you get there, like that's academic related, there's someone to help you along the process in all facets. And really, you deserve that, because you're paying for that help. So, fight for that help. You deserve it. If you're not getting somewhere, and you really, really need this help, find someone who can give you those answers. There will be someone that can take care of you in that sense.
Awesome.
But with that, I think, yeah.
Sean, Jennifer, Christian, thank you so much. And Sean, especially, for your thoughtful and extremely thorough presentation that put it into terms that a student can understand much better. I know I'm going to be hitting you up in 2 years when my daughter's doing this process, because I understood it much better than I ever have before. And I know as a professor, some of the more panicked conversations I have with students revolve around this subject. And it's one of the ones that I've always felt least equipped to assist them with. But again, I think as you break it down and talk to students and parents in a language that they can understand, I think you reduce the anxiety for a lot of people, and kind of continue to communicate that there are best practices, there are resources, there are ways to make this process easier. I can't thank you enough for sharing that. One of the things with camp in general that we've tried to do is provide students with, excuse me, perspective from people at different parts of their journey, and that was impressive. It's great to have you share that and make things clear for everyone. So thank you.
Of course, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
and good luck to everyone.
yeah.
I hope you always pursue, never give up, believe in yourself. I know you hear that a lot, but it's true. Keep fighting for what you want, always.
And if it doesn't go exactly how you planned, don't worry about it. It'll figure itself out. You'll approach a situation. One thing that a lot of us have in common is doing athletics in high school, and that prepares you to take opportunities that come at the right time. So don't worry if it doesn't go to plan. It's not the end of the world if you can't do athletics in college or you can't go exactly where you wanted. It'll work out as long as you just keep your own interests in mind and want the best for yourself. And that's all you can ask of yourself. So just let it happen, and you'll figure it out along the way. Don't stress about it. That's the best thing I can offer.
Sometimes a major pivot turns out to be just fine in the end.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
What a duo.